Timothy Burns, Tim to his friends, looked at his cell phone after leaving a message from Candace, or Candy, as she liked to be called, his wife of 5 years. He had just signed a service contract with a large California company that had offices throughout the country. He knew his boss, Jake Hudson, would be extremely pleased as the new contract meant a significant expansion of his IT firm. The new contract also meant a significant increase in his salary. Maybe now, he thought, he and Candy will finally be able to start their own family, as they had planned. But he had concerns that had begun to creep into his mind after his camping trip with Jake a little over a week ago. There was something a little different about her when they returned from their trip. It seemed like her mind was on something else most of the time, and she was starting to get a little snappy with him. But that was not all. He noticed something else when they got home and threw their clothes into the laundry basket. A pair of her panties had something in the gusset. He picked them up and noticed that whatever it was already hardened and had a very distinctive smell. Then it dawned on him, and he felt as if his whole world had collapsed. He vowed to find out the truth. He knew he would be heading to the West Coast, so he visited an attorney to see what his options were. If Candy cheated, he thought, it would be the end of their marriage. "Are you sure that your wife is cheating on you?" asked Ruby Hawkins. Ruby was a lawyer who specialized in family law and divorce and was recommended to him by a friend who had just divorced his wife for cheating. "Not 100%, he said, "but I need to know. And if that's the case, I want a divorce." "Well then," said Ruby, "most divorces in this state occur without anyone's fault. You can file on the grounds of adultery, but you will need compelling evidence." "Do you mean, for example, photographs or videos?" Tim asked. "Yes," said Ruby. "If you want, I can instruct an investigator to follow her and find out for sure." "Yes, please," Tim said. "What can I expect during a divorce?" "Well, since she makes about the same amount as you do from your teaching job, there's a chance that we can save you from having to pay her any child support," Ruby said. "You don't own any real estate and you don't have any children, so essentially it's going to be split 50-50. You keep your pension and she keeps hers. Essentially, this is an even distribution of assets. If she cheats on you, we will use that as a basis and use whatever evidence we have to ensure a good outcome. I'll start the paperwork and we'll send it when we have the evidence." "Okay," Tim said. "Let's do that. I'll be out of town for about 3 days, so I think that's when she'll probably do it." She called her investigator, Marvin Johnson, and he suggested Tim install a tracking app on her phone. He also gave Tim a device to record phone calls on his landline and an audio recorder, which he hid in her purse. Tim hated doing this, but he had to know the truth. There were other clues as well. Ever since they'd gone camping, Jakey had seemed even more arrogant and condescending than before. It was almost as if he knew something that Tim didn't. He managed to hold out for a week, and Candy drove him to the airport, kissing him goodbye. "I'll call you this evening after dinner," he said. "Okay, honey," she told him. "Have a good flight." The first night he was away, he called Candy as promised and was a little shocked when she told him that she would be working as a waitress at the party Jake was throwing at his house that evening. According to Candy, one of the waitresses was sick, and Jake asked if she would be willing to fill in for her. He didn't know that Jake had any plans because he didn't mention anything. "He promised to pay me $150 for the evening," Candy said. "I could use some extra money since I won't be back to work until a couple of weeks later." He knew classes would resume soon and she could really use some extra money, but something wasn't right about it. "Really?" Tim asked. "Okay, go ahead, but be careful and tell me about it tomorrow, okay?" "Okay," she said. "You know that I love you, right?" "Yes," he said. "And I love you too. Good night." He finished the conversation, but a knot began to twist in his stomach. He called the investigator. "I just wanted to let you know that Candy was asked to waitress at a party at Jake Hudson's house," Tim said. "Okay," said Marvin. "We succeeded. I'll forward you everything we find out." "Thank you," Tim said, ending the conversation. The next day, he called Candy on her cell phone, but received no answer. He also called his home phone, but only got an answering machine. Of course, she didn't spend the night with Jake, he thought to himself. However, his hopes were dashed when he received an email from Marvin that same day. Candy spent the night at Hudson's house, and she is still there, the email said, and she was very busy the night before. I've attached a couple of photos, but I want to warn you that they are quite graphic. I will give you my full report when you return. Tim opened the attachments, and his heart sank. His beloved wife was there with whom he lived for 5 years. She had sex with 3 men he had once considered friends. His hands began to shake and tears began to flow from his eyes. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He tried calling her again, but it went straight to voicemail. He also tried to call his home phone, but only got an answering machine. He didn't leave any message and went to the hotel bar to drown his sorrows. The next morning, he checked the tracker and found that Candy's phone was still at Jake's house, which meant she was probably still there. Marvin confirmed this assumption with an email that contained 2 more photographs of his wife. The nature of the photographs was the same as the previous ones, but with 10 men, including Jake, his son Mike, and 5 more employees of Jake's IT company. He had once considered all these people to be reliable colleagues, but that was no longer the case. He didn't recognize the other 3 and assumed they were Mike's friends. He completed his business with the California client and, contract in hand, checked out of the hotel and caught an early flight home. He caught a taxi at the airport and noticed that Candy's car was missing when he arrived home. Checking the tracker, he saw that her phone was still in Jake's house. He went inside, changed his clothes, and called Ruby's office. He was surprised when her receptionist said that she was free and could see him in the afternoon. He called Candy on her cell phone and was surprised when she answered. She seemed out of breath when she answered. "Hello?" she asked. "Hi, it's me, Tim," he said. "Where are you?" "I'm home. Just finishing up a few things before class starts," she said. He was shocked that she had lied to him so blatantly. "I see," he said. "Well, I'm done here in California and I'm heading home." "Oh, okay," she said. "I missed you so much. Call me when you land and I'll pick you up at the airport." "No, don't worry," he said. "I'll take a taxi. Bye." He ended the conversation and wondered if she noticed that he didn't tell her that he loved her, or that they would see each other later. Shaking his head, he left the house and went to visit Ruby. Candy looked at the phone after Tim ended the call. He always ended his calls by saying he loved her, but this time he didn't. In fact, she noticed that his voice didn't sound friendly at all. She fully intended to return home after that first night, but lying naked between Jake and his son felt so good that she just couldn't leave. After all, she owed it to herself, she thought. This will all end when classes start again, she thought. And Tim would never know. So she spent the next day and the next night with Jake and his son Mike. That second day, Jake went to work for a couple of hours, but Mike kept her busy and even made arrangements with several of his friends. When Jake returned home, she was having sex with Mike on Jake's bed. When they finished, Jake sat up and looked at her. "So maybe I should send your husband somewhere more often," he said with a sly smile. "You know that my classes are resuming soon," she said. "So I won't be available for a week. I wouldn't dare do anything like that while he's still at home." "Why not?" Jake asked. "Maybe for a change he would enjoy seeing how real men treat you." Jake and Mike both laughed at this. "Well, I have to admit I had a great time," she said. "But I still love Tim, and I don't want to hurt him." "Well, maybe I can see to it that he gets sent away for the weekend," Jake said. "That way you can come and play with us in the house." "Sounds funny," she said. "But at some point he will find out anyway. Tim is not a fool, you know." "Don't worry," Jake said, picking up his video camera. "I'll take care of Timmy boy. There is only one thing." "What is this?" she asked. "I don't want you to have sex with him anymore," Jake said. "Now you belong to us, understood?" "But how will I do this?" she asked. "You'll think of something," Jake said. "Come up with some excuse. You know, like, I have a headache, or something like that. Okay, I'll try, she said. Later that day, several of Mike's friends came over and had the opportunity to try Candy's products. Jake invited a few single guys from the group. She was now officially a party slut and enjoying it. Tim was simply shocked when he saw all the evidence Marvin had collected. In addition to the photographs, he had 2 DVDs of videos of his wife performing a variety of roles with several men, things she would never do for him. His love for her faded after he witnessed her debauchery. Ruby consoled him as best she could, but it was a lost cause. How could she just like that 5 years later turn into such a traitor, he wondered. And what did I do to deserve this? What about Jake? He considered this man somewhat older than himself a friend. Now he knew better. I'll go ahead and file for divorce, citing adultery, Ruby said. If you want, I can also file a lawsuit for alienation of affection against Jake and the men you work with. These types of lawsuits don't usually go very far, but I think we can get a good settlement. Do what you have to do, Tim said. Just don't do anything stupid, Ruby said. I don't want to post bail for you from jail. Tim shook his head. Don't worry, he said. I won't. When can you prepare the documents? I can have everything ready to ship in just a couple of days, she said. In the meantime, try to behave normally around your wife. I'm not that good an actor, Tim told her, and I will never touch her again. God only knows what she got from all these men. Tell her you're not feeling well, Ruby suggested. This should buy you some time. Tim nodded his head. Yes, okay, he said, before leaving. As he sat in his car, he suddenly realized something else. There was no way he could work for Jake again, and he would never be able to bear the presence of men nearby who would cuckold him. He took out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he wanted. He dialed the number and hoped for the best. Carlson, said the man on the other end of the line when he answered. John, this is Tim Burns, Tim said. Tim, how are you, old friend? Asked John. It could have been better, Tim said. Listen, is this vacancy at Empire still open? John Carlson, CEO of Empire, had been trying to get Tim on board for some time, but Tim felt he needed to stay with Jake out of loyalty. However, now there is no trace of this devotion left. Of course it is, said John. Have you finally decided to join a reputable company? Yeah, something like that, Tim said. Some things caught my attention and I found that I could no longer work there. I'm sorry to hear that, John said. Is there anything I can do? Just give me a job, Tim said. I promise I will work just as hard for you as I do for Jake. Of course, said John. Can you start on Monday? Absolutely true, Tim said. Okay, John said. Look, why don't you and your pretty wife come over tonight and try Rose's famous lasagna? We can catch up and I can discuss the compensation package with you. I would love to, but unfortunately, I can't come with my wife, said Tim. About? Asked John. What's happened? I really don't want to go into detail over the phone, Tim said. I can go a little deeper into this tonight if you want. Of course, Tim, John said in a worried tone. You know, Rose is a licensed counselor. Maybe she can help you if you want. That actually sounds good, John. I appreciate it, Tim said. Okay, John said. I'll call Rose and let her know. Do you think you can come in at, say, 6:30 p.m.? Of course, said Tim. Today at 6:30. Thanks again, buddy. With pleasure, said John. They ended the conversation and Tim felt as if a huge weight had been lifted off his back. He started the car and headed home. When he got there, he noticed that Candy still hadn't returned from Jake's house. He grabbed his briefcase and went inside. He took a shower, changed clothes, and sat down at the computer, where he wrote a letter of resignation. Candy finally arrived around 5 p.m. and noticed her husband sitting at the computer. She went to kiss him, but he turned away, and she ended up kissing him on the cheek. Surprised, she looked at him before speaking. Everything is fine? She asked. Not really, he said. I do not feel well. Maybe it's jet lag or something, I don't know. I'll sleep on the futon when I get back tonight. Will you come back? She asked. Where are you going? I'm meeting someone for dinner, he said. Are you dating a woman? She asked with concern in her voice. You mean, am I cheating on you? He asked her. No, I never cheated on you in all the time we were together, and I have no intention of doing it now. Can you say the same? She recoiled in horror. Does he know? She asked herself. No, he would never have been able to find out. Of course I can, she said. Tim wasn't convinced. So, how was your trip to California? She asked, trying to change the subject. Successful, he said. How was your little job at Jake's house? Everything went well, she said. Even when it was hard, it was still fun. I bet, he said without any emotion in his voice. He looked at his watch before speaking again. I guess I'll go, he told her before saving his work and turning off the computer. He stood up, walked past her without saying a word, and headed to the master bedroom, where he changed into something less casual. When he came out, Candy was sitting on the sofa. How long will you be gone? She asked. I don't know, he said. Do not wait for me. Bye. He grabbed his keys and headed to the door. She couldn't help but notice that he didn't kiss her or tell her he loved her. He always did this when he left the house. Seeing his car drive away, she picked up her home phone and called Jake, unaware that her conversation was being recorded. Jake, I think he knows something, she said. What makes you think that? Jake asked. He didn't touch me at all, she said. Usually he always kisses me and says he loves me, but he didn't. He seemed so cold, and he just left, saying he had an appointment for dinner. About? Jake asked. He didn't say with whom? No, he didn't do it, she said. JK, what if he knows? What if he plans to leave me? So, what if he does? Jake grinned. You can always come and stay with us, and don't worry about Timmy boy. I will make him run so much that he will hardly ever be home. But I don't want to lose him, Candy exclaimed. I love him, Jake laughed out loud. Yes, you've shown us all how much you love him over the past 2 days, haven't you? Jake asked. It's not funny, Jake, she said. I know what I did to you guys, and yes, I liked it, but I still love him. I don't want to lose him. Yes, exactly, said Jake. Look, let him get this out of his head. After a while, he will come on board, and if he doesn't, well, we can do something about it too. You're not going to hurt him, are you? She asked. Not many words, Jake said. We just have to show him how things will be from now on, and you will help this happen. What? Candy asked in shock. When the time comes, you will help us explain everything to him. Remember who you belong to now. I'm sure you wouldn't want the school board to see the video footage we have of you. You wouldn't dare, Candy said. Oh yeah, but I'd love to, Jake said. I have a video of you on a hike, and a lot of videos of you in very compromising positions. Your ass literally belongs to me, so you need to keep little Timmy in line. Feeling trapped, Candy gave up. Okay, Jake, she said. But don't hurt him, Jake chuckled over the phone. Yes, as you say, he said, ending the conversation. Tim drove up to the large 2-story house where John and Rose Carlson lived. He got out of the car, grabbing a bottle of wine that he had picked up on the way. John opened the door as he rang the bell and graciously accepted the wine. Come in, Tim, he said with a smile. And thanks. This will be put to good use tonight. John led Tim to the dining room where Rose was waiting for him with her lasagna. Tim, please meet my wife Rose, John said. Rose, this is Tim Burns, our new customer service representative. Tim shook Rose's hand while John opened a bottle of wine. Nice to meet you, Tim, Rose said with a smile. I'm glad to meet you too, Mrs. Carlson, Tim said. Please call me Rose, she said. Mrs. Carlson sounds so official. They took their places at the table, and Rose served lasagna on plates while John poured the wine. Tim had never tasted such delicious lasagna and expressed his gratitude. This is the best lasagna I've ever eaten, he said. I'm glad you like it, Rose said. This is one of my signature dishes. So, Tim, I don't want to pry into someone else's business, but I'm curious as to why you decided to break up with Jake so quickly, John said. Something happened? Tim nodded his head before starting. Yeah, something happened, Tim said. Please, Tim, tell us about this, Rose asked. Tim took a moment to collect his thoughts before telling them the story. Damn, John said. It's chilling. I sympathize with you, I really do. Something similar happened to me, but the circumstances were completely different. So what are you going to do now other than change jobs? I've met with a lawyer, and I'm filing for divorce, Tim said. My lawyer says it will be a pretty much even split. What about a consultation? Asked Rose. Did you think about that? This has gone too far, Tim said. I don't know what hit Candy. It's like she just flipped a switch and suddenly became a slut. I never thought she would have the strength to do this. How do you cope with all this? Asked Rose. Not too good, Tim said. My lawyer says that I should try to behave normally around Candy, but it is very difficult for me to do this. Right now, I can't even look at her. Maybe you should see a psychologist, she said. I can do it, Tim said. Trust me, Rose is the best in the business, John said. I think she can help you get through this if you want. In addition, this is included in your social package. That's definitely a plus, Tim said, laughing. I'm serious, John said. Rose was a godsend when I needed her. I know she can help you too. He turned to Rose. What do you think? Can you fit it into your schedule? Of course, she said. I think an hour a week should do the trick. What do you say about this, Tim? Tim thought about this proposal before answering. Okay, I'll do it, he said. John smiled and patted Tim on the shoulder. A good man, he said. I will make sure that you have the time necessary for consultation. Deal with Rose and let me know what you come up with. I'll do that, thanks, Tim said. Now, if you don't mind, honey, Tim and I will retire to my office to discuss his new job, John said. I don't mind at all, she said with a smile. And I'm looking forward to working with you too, Tim. Thank you, Tim said, standing next to John. They retired to John's home office, where he poured them each a glass of brandy. They spent the next 2 hours discussing his new job. By the time they finished, Tim felt like he was taking control of his life again. Tim shook John's hand and headed back home. It was around 10 p.m. when Tim arrived at his house. He looked around and saw that the lights were still on in his house. He hoped Candy was there alone. He got out of the car, walked into his house, and saw Candy sitting on the sofa. So, how did your little meeting go? She asked. Very good, thank you, he said. Now, if you don't mind, I'll go to bed. Good night. He went into the second bedroom, where his computer was, and began to undress. Are you sleeping here now? Candy asked from the door. Yes, said Tim. I'm still not feeling well, so I'll sleep on the futon. This is problem? No. I think not, she said. It's just that you've been gone for 3 days, and I was hoping that we could, play a little. I'm not in the mood today, Tim said. In fact, the thought of touching her right now made him disgusted. Okay, she said quietly. Maybe tomorrow? I don't know, he said. Let's see. She nodded her head and turned away. She couldn't help but wonder if he even knew anything about her actions lately. The next day, he got up before Candy, grabbed his resignation letter, and poured himself a cup of coffee. He saw Candy's purse on the kitchen table and grabbed the audio recorder, then downloaded the audio recording of yesterday's phone call. He left the apartment without saying goodbye or telling Candy that he loved her. She heard the door close as he left and went to bed. Tears rolled down her cheeks. When he got to the office, he barely spoke to anyone. He greeted his secretary, then walked into his office and closed the door. He was gathering his things when Jake walked into his office. What is this? Jake asked. Tim reached into his briefcase and pulled out 2 envelopes. One of them is a signed contract from California, he said. And the second is my resignation, effective immediately. I believe you owe me a bonus for getting the California bill, and you owe me my final salary along with the rest of my vacation.